Vault 1080 isn't a real vault. Vault 1080 comes from a fun little adventure mod by NVIDIA. That's right, the same NVIDIA that makes video cards. Vault 1080 is a Fallout 4 mod that NVIDIA created to show off the way that they process God rays. God rays are the beams of light that you find from light sources in the game. Many people turn these off for performance reasons, but if your machine can handle them, they do look rather stunning. NVIDIA is really proud of the way that they handle God rays in Fallout 4, and so they decided to release this mod to show them off. Now, I avoided reviewing this mod until now because I had an AMD card for the longest time. But I recently got a new graphics card, the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1080 Ti Gaming X. This graphic card is supposed to be top of the line, so I figured now is the time to test out the God rays in this mod. This mod should be considered more of a tech demo than anything really, but it does come with some interesting backstory. So, with this video, we're going to explore Vault 1080 and bear witness to those sweet, sweet God rays. The story begins just west of Vault 111. Beneath an electric tower, we find an abandoned shack. Inside the mailbox, we find Dr. Morgan's note number 1 to someone named Max on his birthday. In the note, she apologizes to Max. She says, "I wish I could have brought you to the surface," but she can't because her body is failing. She says, "I don't think I'll live long enough to go back for you." She's starting to suffer the symptoms of radiation poisoning: nausea, headache, hair loss. Strangely enough, it looks like Max can withstand radiation poisoning fairly well, but she says, "I can't withstand radiation like you can." She tried to search these nearby marshes for help, but all she found was raiders, and so she closed herself up in this shack. She says it's too dangerous to leave. And then she puts Max's fate in your hands. She tells Max in this note that she might not have been able to save him, but that she hopes that someone else someday will succeed where she failed. Signed, Dr. Rachel Morgan. Now, I looked all over this shack and there's no entrance, so there's no way for us to go inside and see if Dr. Morgan's skeleton is really inside. But it's not. I even toggled clipping and there's nothing inside the shack. But our quest log updates to explore the marsh. Following the road out from the shack, we can pass a number of warning signs that tell us to stay back, to turn around, to do not enter. Eventually, this brings us to Devil's Marsh, where we get attacked by a variety of mirelurks. At length, we come upon the Church of the Valley, and it's here where we get our first dose of sweet, sweet God rays. The mod author placed some vines and trees in front of the light sources, creating shafts of light that shine through the cracks. Once done admiring the God rays, we can pass by some splattered blood on a cinder block wall to enter the church. NVIDIA had some fun decorating up the interior of this church. We find the skeleton of a dapper man sitting on a couch holding a beer wearing a hat. Inside the sanctuary, we find evidence of a camp. Looks like maybe raiders came here at one point. Up on the choir seats next to the pipe organ, we find another interesting skeleton. Looks like this guy got himself drunk and he's vomiting into a bucket. Lots of empty beer bottles all over. And his just mirror do his hands look really large. Look how large those hands are. Maybe they just appear larger because they're bones, but they just look like huge. Now, since this mod is all about God rays and beams of light, I'm going to turn off my torch and I'm going to try and keep it off for most of this video so that we can enjoy the God rays as they were meant to be seen. I'll only turn it on when it gets too dark. There is a terminal on the wall, and here we find some diary entries from this church's former pastor. We learn that Vault-Tec approached them and offered to build a vault underneath their church. The pastor agreed under the condition that his church's members were given first choice for inclusion. Vault-Tec agreed and they began construction. Everything seemed to be going fine. The only issue is that some of the church trustees didn't like the idea of having the vault attached to the church's foundation. Aside from that, the pastor is pleased, but on February 19th, 2071, he received some troubling news. His church has been growing ever since people found out that by becoming a member, they get automatic access to a nearby vault. Because of this, Vault-Tec has told him that the vault will not be large enough to accommodate everyone. The final option is to open the shutters. And as soon as we do, we get attacked by 4 blood bugs. 2 of them ran away. We can go through the southern hallway to kill one of them, but the other went down below to the vault. So in the meantime, what happened here? Well, we opened the shutters, so this is light coming in through the stained glass. I guess that's why it's not white light, it's yellow, green, red. It shines through the stained glass window and then through a chandelier hanging from the ceiling, giving off quite an intense effect. Alright, NVIDIA, looking good. Heading through the northern door, we find another little Easter egg. Here a skeleton wearing a militia hat is playing with blocks that spell out the word NVIDIA. Of course. Hey, can't fault a company for being proud of their work, right? Heading down the stairs so we can take care of that last blood bug. Going through the cave, we see some rather large glowing fungus. This abnormally large glowing fungus. Sadly, we can't loot it. Someone has made a rickety bridge across this chasm over towards the vault. I tried jumping down the hole, and if you jump down, you just die, even if you're wearing freefall armor. The god rays shine through the hole in the floor, which gives off quite an effect. And then to enter the vault, we just hop through the broken door. This puts us in the entryway where we find our first ghoul. Rather hard to see these guys in the darkness. Not sure how long I can keep from using my light. To access Vault 1080, we take the elevator in the wall. Our quest log updates. Find information regarding the vault and its residents. Looks like there are 7 different terminals that we need to read. Well, since there's only one room to the left, let's check out the Overseer first, see if we can find some information there. After killing some rad roaches, we see some more god rays coming from behind the Overseer's desk. This light is placed behind a fallen chair to fracture the light and produce the god rays. Alright, NVIDIA, sick god rays. I'm loving it. This is the first of the 7 terminals that we need to find. These are notes from the original pastor of the church, Pastor Philip Harrison. We learned that in exchange for allowing his entire congregation into the vault, Pastor Philip Harrison agreed to become overseer of Vault 1080. Space is tight, he says. And everyone rushed to the vault so quickly after the bombs dropped that no one was able to bring any of their precious belongings with them, or trinkets and baubles, as he describes them. That's right, gotta leave that materialism behind. In the next one, we learned that Philip Harrison may have had to compromise his morals to be overseer of this vault. It's a new world, he says, but not a better one, mind you. He says that some have expressed concerns over what Vault Tech is doing to the people here. The experiments that they are doing, some are saying, are unacceptable. I think Harrison is also having trouble with what Vault Tech is asking him to do. Oddly, he defends the experiments by referencing scripture. He says, when Eve chose the apple, she chose knowledge over complacency. We descended from sinners and we must live and adapt in the world we inherited. As a pastor, he should know that, Eve made a wrong decision. But by eating the apple, that was bad, according to the Bible. It was eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge and good and evil that was the very first sin. Comparing yourself to Eve as if what Eve did was a good thing is not something a pastor would have done. And also, she didn't choose knowledge over complacency. She chose sin over innocence. If you don't know the difference between good and evil, you can't be held accountable. But once you do, you can. By eating the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, she knew the difference. And it was after that she and all of her descendants could be held accountable. We then learn a little bit more about Dr. Morgan. That's right, the same Dr. Morgan whose note to Max we read in that mailbox above ground. Apparently, Dr. Morgan was a Vault Tech employee. Harrison says, I fear that her compassion is misplaced and that her desire to curtail the transitions does more harm than good. Annoyingly, Harrison ends by quoting scripture again. He says, you will be hated by all because of my name, but the one who endures to the end, he will be saved. He tried to use this verse to make it appear that being the overseer over a vault doing experiments on its people and then being held accountable to it is somehow a form of persecution, which is not at all how this verse is supposed to be used. In this verse, Jesus is saying that Christians will be persecuted because of his name. Not that, you can go ahead and do any evil thing that you want to, but hey, if you do it in my name, well, then it's okay. And anyone who opposes you is only persecuting you because they're actually persecuting me. That's, of course, ridiculous, and a real pastor would not have made that mistake. At length we come to a fork in the road. Do we follow the god rays on the left or the god rays on the right? The god rays on the left or the god rays on the right? Well, let's start by going right. And in here we find the corpses of raiders. Looks like Dr. Morgan was right in her note that we found in the mailbox. There were raiders nearby. They're the ones that made that camp, and probably the ones who made the rickety bridge that led to the vault. Here we even find some yellow god rays. Oh man, look at this warning light. It's not even brightly shining. Look at that, it's dimly lit. But check out those god rays. Woo boy, god rays are overwhelming, NVIDIA. Here we find the second terminal. This is the security terminal, and we learn how Vault Tech cared for the inhabitants of this vault. Now, it seems like they were calling excessive radiation poisoning transformation. I think we can assume that they were turning people into ghouls. Now, there are far too few cages in the security section for every member of the vault, so maybe this was a small brig just for people who broke the rules of the vault. The note says strange things like, if the prisoner does not eat food, leave it in the cell to rot. That will encourage consumption. I guess we are to assume that feral ghouls prefer to eat rotting food. If prisoners become unruly, the security staff is to expose them to 1 hour of bright light with an increased jail sentence. Okay, looks like NVIDIA is trying to weave in these lights into the lore. This is how they're going to explain the huge bright lights around every single corner. They are used to push back the feral ghouls. Okay. Now, they clean the cages at 6 o'clock every evening, and the way they do so is by spraying water at the ghouls through the cage. And here we learn the fate of Dr. Rachel Morgan. She is now called Prisoner 377. She talks a great deal and frequently shows unruly behavior. They tried punishing her with bright light, but it has no negative effect on her, and that's because she had not been given any transformation therapy, aka radiation exposure, and so they decide that they want to expose her to radiation. This would, quote, punish her more effectively while encouraging future transformation. And finally, from this terminal, we can unlock all of the doors in this room, both cell doors and the locked security gate. As soon as we do, a feral ghoul who was in one of the cages attacks. Inside on the toilet is Dr. Morgan's note number 4. In the note, she says that she knows how to escape. Every night, electricity in the vault resets, which gives her an opportunity for 2.3 seconds to slide something into the door lock while the circuit is broken to keep the door unlocked. However, she didn't take advantage of this knowledge because she wanted to bring somebody with her, a young boy in the congregation named Max. He's very sick, and she doesn't think that he's going to survive transformation, aka radiation exposure. And she wants to save him from a life of living in the dark, feeling his flesh rot while his body struggles to adapt. She won't survive much more radiation, and she has to escape tonight. Max is supposed to meet her so that they can escape together, but she's worried that he won't because the pastor might have poisoned his mind. And then she pleads with you. She says, please, whoever finds this, do what you can for him. Now, this is confusing. This note is in this cell where we just killed a feral ghoul. She says that she knew how to escape, but she chose not to because she wanted to save Max. So are we to assume that this ghoul is the remains of Dr. Morgan? But the first note that we found up top said that she had already escaped and she had to leave Max behind. She said that she had to hide from the raiders inside that shack. So who's Dr. Morgan? Is it this ghoul or is it the woman who laid down in the shack? Also, how could Dr. Morgan's note have gotten topside and into that mailbox had she not escaped? And if she did escape, who is this ghoul in Dr. Morgan's cell? Maybe Dr. Morgan wrote the note and then escaped. She tried to meet up with Max, but Max never showed up, and so she left the vault. Then maybe a couple days went by and another prisoner was placed in her cell, and the Vault Tech security people didn't bother to remove Rachel's personal belongings like the note she left. That may be the best explanation that we have. The next terminal is in the Commons room. It looks like the members of this vault put on a big celebration every time somebody had, quote, transformed. The latest one to transform was Victoria Sanders. For those who had not yet transformed, they were supposed to bring their own food, but for those who had transformed, sustenance soup would be provided for them. Looks like there were a lot of children in this vault. The vault is looking for a volunteer to teach the children about the dangers of living above. Some of the children entertained curiosity about the fiery sunshine and the ravenous beasts to be found outdoors. We want to remind them how blessed they are to live safely in the shadows. The last one appears to be a note from one of the residents who had undergone transformation. It's spelled horribly, but we can just make it out. Something is wrong, can't see, everything is dark. I keep throwing up, it tastes bloody. Shouldn't I be transforming? Something is wrong, please help me. In the nursery on a table, next to God rays shining through a crib, we find Dr. Morgan's note number 2. This is where the story gets even darker. Dr. Morgan admits to Max that she tried to kill him. It was part of her job as a Vault-Tec scientist. He didn't have the proper genes, you see. He wouldn't have survived transformation. She tried to kill him, but somehow he survived. She says that she normally doesn't believe in miracles, but she doesn't know how else to explain the fact that he's still alive. She's writing this while he's still an infant. She has no idea how he'll even survive here as a toddler in the darkness, but she just had to put these words somewhere, even if no one will ever read them. She says, "My job changed the day I tried to kill you. You resisted death. You proved to me that there was no such thing as fate. We all have a choice, and now I choose to protect you." Why did she try to kill him to begin with? Well, the nearby nursery terminal tells us this. We find a list of all of the children that Vault-Tec had killed in this vault. A male, 6.1 pounds, a female, 7.7 pounds. Almost all of them were killed for the same reason. They lack the VS genetic sequence. So here, according to the lore of this mod, the thing inside a human body that can predict whether or not a person will turn into a ghoul or die from radiation exposure is the VS genetic sequence. Vault-Tec identified it, and they used this vault's population to expose people to radiation to see if they can lift out the VS genetic sequence. But if you were born and you did not have that genetic sequence, you were killed. Max didn't have it, and so Dr. Morgan was told to kill him, but she just couldn't. This is confirmed by another doctor, Dr. Pearson. Max was marked for termination because he lacked the VS genetic sequence, and his health is suffering from all of the radiation exposure, so he wants to terminate Max while he's still an infant. But Dr. Morgan destroyed his records and tried to hide him. This must be the reason why she was eventually put in the security cell. Finally, we see a note on how to deal with crying children. The Vault-Tec staff are only allowed to hold and rock a baby if the baby is crying and it exhibits no health concerns. But they are only allowed to hold babies in this manner at a maximum of 3 times a day. Otherwise, the infant must remain in its container. Well, it looks like NVIDIA really captured the essence of the horror that is Vault-Tec. It sounds like something Vault-Tec would do, it really does. We find many corpses in this vault. The skeleton of a woman who blew her brains out with a 10mm pistol. Skeleton of a man on a couch, surrounded by beer. A woman on another couch, surrounded by blood splatter with a 10mm pistol on the ground. A skeleton of a man in a closet, surrounded by chems. Skeleton of a woman and a man by a sleeping bag, with blood splatter everywhere, holding a machete. These must be the corpses of those who had not yet transformed, but didn't want to spend the rest of their days in this vault. In one room, we find some God rays coming out of a desk fan. Oh man, NVIDIA, I just can't handle it. You're getting me all hot and bothered with these God rays, NVIDIA. Oh man, I gotta take a break from this game. I'm just overwhelmed by the God rays. The next terminal is in the residential room, and here we learn some information about the members of the congregation who moved into the vault. A man named Sam Gilbert came to the vault with his daughters Sarah and Becca. He's looking forward to his life filled with prayer and contemplation here in the vault. His daughter Sarah is accepting the transition with dignity and grace, but his daughter Becca is having more problems. The next note is from Becca, and Becca says, "This is lame." She kind of sees this whole thing for what it is. She says, "Why do I have to spend the rest of my life in a cement block underground?" She says the dad says that there's a whole lot of danger on the surface, mainly radiation, but Dad, there's radiation down here too. They're pumping us with it on purpose. Looks like this young Becca realized what was really going on. Then there's Miller. This is a retiree who lived in a nursing home before this. He says that there are a lot of people complaining in this vault, but he doesn't mind it. He says it's quiet underground. The folks around him are pretty crazy, but at least he's out of that nursing home. Then there's Scott Snyder. This guy drank the Kool-Aid. He's all on board with Pastor Harrison. Talks about how much he loves it here, and he says, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear evil, for only God's chosen will survive." Yeah, that's not how it went, buddy. He's even misquoting and misusing scripture, just like Pastor Harrison. Real chip off the old block. Then there's the McPhee family logs, with only one entry from Allison McPhee, and she talks about her experiences going through the transformation. That is, the radiation poisoning. At first it hurt, at first she was miserable, but now she doesn't know. She says that she can see in the dark now, and that she doesn't really get hungry. She says, "I feel reborn. Have I been chosen?" And then the final note is from an angry woman named Benish. This was the self-righteous gossiper of the congregation. She criticizes Janice for bringing pots and pans, like they're going to be doing a lot of cooking in the vault. And she criticizes Jolene The day the bombs dropped, she was in the shower, and she didn't have time to put her clothes on, so she came to the vault naked except for her towel. Brandish says that this is all just a ploy. She thinks that Jolene is just putting on airs, trying to make it seem like she made a big sacrifice by coming to the vault without any clothes on. And she's disgusted by all of the boys leering at her. She can't stand it. She has another note about affairs everywhere. She notices all of these men having affairs on their wives. Albert has been sleeping with Gary's wife, Lacey. She's disgusted by the affairs, and she fears that no amount of piety on my part will be enough to overcome these unfaithful and ungrateful animals. But the last note is kind of out of tone for Brandish. She says it's getting quiet around here. She tells us that it's been getting hard to keep tabs on people lately. She tried to follow Albert to see if he was going to sleep with Gary's wife again, but instead he went into a meditation room, turned off the lights, and closed himself in. He was in there for hours, and when he came out, he was coughing and wheezing. He's not looking very good. He, along with Albert's wife, have been getting the transformation therapy, but Brandish doesn't think it's doing him very good. Everyone who's taking the transformation therapy keeps on looking worse. The next terminal, 6 of 7, is a reminder to those who have undergone transformation therapy. The overseer encourages them to be courteous to other vault dwellers who have not yet undergone transformation therapy. They're not going to understand these people's new bodies and new emotions, and those who have undergone the therapy might even frighten those who have not. They are urged to continue to love their neighbors, even if they are scared of you. In the next note, he warns those who have not yet undergone transformation therapy to not venture below the 2nd level. And then in all caps, he says, "This rule is for your own safety. Those who do not obey will be punished." Oh dear, what could be down here? I got distracted by some more sweet, sweet god rays and didn't even notice the sentry bot getting ready to attack me. In some sort of science lab in the basement, surrounded by blinding god rays, we find the final terminal, the Overseer's terminal. In here, we see the Overseer starting to express some regret. He's concerned about the children. They never experienced the old world. They won't remember what light was like. Now they only know darkness. Is this what we have wrought? He asks. Most of the people can no longer care for themselves. He has to care for them, and he says it's an enormous burden. To care for them, the Overseer has gone to the surface on multiple occasions to scavenge for supplies. But the radiation above ground has taken its toll on him. He's starting to feel sick. He says, "Perhaps my only hope now is to transform like all of the others." And so he embraces it. He's going to expose himself to more radiation to transform like the others. He sees this as a form of penance. We find doors to a reactor room, but we can't unlock them. It says it requires the terminal. And as we continue, we find a whole bunch of ghouls, but these are not aggressive, and some of them have names. We find Allison and Becca. These are the names of the people that we saw on the terminal. Going through the room right next to them, we finally come face to face with Overseer Harrison. Now, this mod does not come with a voiced protagonist, so I'm going to have to read what it is we're supposed to be saying.
Did God send you, stranger?
That's a good question, but honestly, I have no idea.
That's a good answer. Doubt keeps one humble. Perhaps if I had been more humble in my youth, I would not have made such grave mistakes. You are clearly from the surface, and you have lost your way. You would be wise to leave now and never return. You will find nothing of value down here. Only darkness and death.
What happened to the people in this vault?
Those who were blessed passed into heaven. Those who were not, we transformed into this.
Then why are you still down here?
I failed to protect my flock when they needed me most. Now I can only hope to safeguard their solitude. Vault Tech promised my congregation a way to adapt to the horrors consuming our world. I believed God chose my church to lead humanity into a new age. I even became the Overseer. My people were subjected to gradual radiation and deepening darkness. They watched their flesh begin to rot away as all their senses sharpened. In a way, Vault Tech's cruel experiments succeeded. We adapted to the radiation and darkness. Our bodies changed shape and substance. But our transformation was far from divine. When you try to adapt to evil rather than overcome it, you can only become a monster yourself.
What happened here is sick, and you're to blame. I'll make sure you die for what you've done.
No, please! My people need me! I won't let you!
And strangely enough, he doesn't actually become hostile. All of the other ghouls become hostile. Even after you kill all of them, you can then reinitiate dialogue with Overseer Harrison and go through the exact same tree again. Instead, we can reload a previous save and ask him about Max. There was a boy here named Max. Dr. Rachel Morgan. She wanted to rescue him from this place.
Oh, Max Fleming. Yes, he was a memorable boy. He had a raw, compassionate soul. His body was weak, but his spirit gave him the strength to survive. He's still alive, scientifically speaking. But the Max that Rachel knew so very long ago, he no longer exists. Only the shell of Max's body remains, dwelling here in the shadows, like the rest of his brothers and sisters in faith. The best thing you can do is let him finish his days in peace. You have shown me more kindness than I deserve. I will do what I can to help you in return. You should return to the surface as quickly as possible. I will open the doors for you. Godspeed.
Well, from this, it sounds like Max became a ghoul. Now, the reactor door says that it needs a terminal to unlock it. There is a terminal in here, but if you unlock this terminal, the only entry we find is a note that says, "Have mercy on us." This note doesn't really tell us anything. In the note, Harrison says, "Do not disturb my congregation and do not open the reactor doors." We don't get an option to open them at all. In the end, I had to use console commands to toggle clipping to walk through the door. And inside, we find the ghoul of Max Fleming. Looks like Dr. Morgan failed. For some reason, Max survived the radiation therapy and grew up to become a ghoul. I tried killing all the ghouls here, including Max and Harrison, and none of them have any further notes or loot on their bodies. Nothing of interest. That leaves escaping, the only thing left to do. You find a ladder through one of the doors, which leads out a hatch next to the church. Now, I had further questions after finishing this quest. A lot of things didn't really add up. For one, why was there no terminal entry to allow me to unlock the reactor doors? Number two, there are still a couple of notes missing from Dr. Morgan. We only found a few of the numbered notes. So I used console commands to find the notes in the game and then place them in my inventory. Here's what they said. The first came from Dr. Morgan. She apologizes to Max for not visiting him in the clinic. She's hoping that he'll get better. The other scientists think that he needs to be treated with more radiation. Max has not yet transformed into a ghoul yet, and many of his friends continue to tease him for not transforming yet. But Rachel keeps telling him he was born with different genes. He won't become a ghoul. Instead, the radiation will kill him. She ends by saying she's going to do whatever it takes to make him better. The final note is written by Max for Rachel. We learn that despite not having the right genes, Max finally transformed and became a ghoul. He's grateful to Rachel for everything she did to try and save him, but ultimately he wished that she hadn't. He wished that she hadn't turned against the congregation and her fellow scientists. He says, "I am reborn now. I am no longer held captive by weak human flesh." He can withstand high levels of radiation. He can see through the shadows. He can meditate in the darkness without food, without nourishment. He ends by saying, "If you have come back for me, stop. Turn around. Go back to the fiery realm of sunshine where your kind belongs." Max. This place throws its story at you in bits and pieces and out of sync. Let me try and really quickly piece everything together in order to kind of get a cohesive story going on here. Dr. Rachel, a Vault-Tec scientist, goes to Vault 1080 to research the VS gene by dousing people with radiation. She's working with kids, and those without the VS gene, she kills. But one day she sees infant Max. She tries to kill Max, but she can't, and she can't bear the thought of going through with it. So she deletes his medical records, and then places him in the hospital. Somehow he remained in the hospital in a weakened state without being killed. He's continually dosed with radiation by the Vault-Tec staff, but despite the fact that he doesn't have the correct genes, he still doesn't die. In the meantime, Dr. Rachel gets arrested and placed in the security prison because she refused to kill Max and she sabotaged his records. Years go by, and Max grows from an infant to a toddler to a young boy. He spends almost all of his time in the hospital. He's a sickly little boy. They keep dosing him with radiation, but instead of turning into a ghoul, he just gets sicker and sicker, but he will not die. His friends who have already become ghouls make fun of him. Max continues to eat up the indoctrination from the overseer. Meanwhile, Rachel spends many years in jail, waiting for the right moment to spring Max. While she's in jail, they dose her with radiation to torment her, which makes her sick. Finally, one day, she manages to arrange a time to meet with Max to rescue him and save him from the vault. But when he shows up, he tells her that he doesn't want to go with her, that he finally has become a ghoul, and that he wants to stay in the vault. He sends her back topside for her to stay with her kind. She flees the vault, but she's so sick that she ends up dying in that little shack, leaving her final note to Max. Max continues to grow and to turn into a ghoul until he finally loses his mind and becomes a feral ghoul. That, I think, is the story that we're supposed to take away from this. It's a sad story. Everyone failed. Dr. Rachel failed to save Max. The pastor failed to save his congregation, realizing only too late that turning them all into feral ghouls was just another sin. And young Max, raised from an infant to believe that transforming into a ghoul was the greatest achievement a human could make, was only able to relish his achievement for a moment before his mind rotted away and he ceased to be Max. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's not often that I go through the lore that comes from mods, but what do you think of this unique story? And what do you think of those sweet, sweet God rays? You know, for a tech demo, it wasn't that bad. We must remember that this is a mod by NVIDIA, and NVIDIA isn't known for making games or writing stories. They have a very different skill set. And despite that very different skill set, we got to enjoy this nice little adventure from them. I think such companies should be encouraged. It's always a good thing when companies and people create more cool content for Fallout 4. And I think their efforts should be applauded. Maybe we'll be lucky and NVIDIA will come out with more mods for Fallout 4, and who knows? Maybe AMD will start to come out with some mods for Fallout 4, and they'll embark on a Fallout 4 mod war, creating a whole bunch of new mod adventures for all of us to enjoy. Wishful thinking, I know. But what are your thoughts, ladies and gentlemen? Let me know in the comment section below. If you're interested in downloading this mod, Vault 1080 by NVIDIA, I link to it in the description of this video. And did you know that I had my own t-shirt shop? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, now you can pick up your very own Oxhorn or a Fallout 4 themed t-shirt, complete with some of your favorite images and quotes from Fallout 4. I've got hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, and an assortment of other goodies. If you're interested, you can find a link to my Teespring shop in the description below. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers get access to a private channel on my Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so glad that you're here with me watching this video today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, with a brand new video.